Pretty much the birthplace of Weezer, practically. Next slide, please. Early on, we played awesome places like Club Dump. And Club Dump later went on to become the Viper Room that Johnny Depp did his thing and spent a lot of money on and probably lost a lot of money on. But back then, it was still Club Dump, and it was really a dump. It really was. But we loved it. We loved it. Next slide, please. Here's another flyer from the early days. In this flyer, I took an ad for a stun gun. And in this story, the woman's trying to get to the Weezer show. She's probably the only fan back then. And the guy's like, no, there's something under your arm, and he grabs for it, but she gets him. And then she puts him out for the count, and she goes on to the Weezer show, and she's like, why are you charging $4.50 for a beer here? Anyway, next slide, please. Here's a set list from the old days, 1993. Strongly resembles the next set you're about to see. Not exactly, but very close. Next slide, please. All right, here's the first written review of Weezer, 1992, Bay Area Magazine in San Francisco, or in LA. Now let's zoom in on the next slide with those two red areas. Let's see here, what's it say? Okay, another band that was trying far too hard to prove something or other was Weezer. This band was probably the most blatant Nirvana wannabe that I've seen yet. And while a slower song at the front end of their set had its moments, the remaining tunes left much to be desired. The sad thing is they might have been right. I mean, who knows? It might have been a bad show. Next slide. But what the hell did they expect? It was free, for God's sake. That we used to make these posters and paste them up all over the, the Post No Bills things all over LA. And about 20 seconds later, some guy would come along with like the latest, rap single and get 9,000 over and just cover us right up again. So those are hard to find today. Next slide, please. There's another one with our friends, the Black Market Flowers and El Magnifico and 1,000 Mona Lisas, all great bands. Black Market Flowers is the first band that our friends Michael and Carly, our dearly departed fan club girls, they first befriended them. And Black Market Flowers had a song called Michael and Carly before Weezer did. Pretty cool. Next slide, please. Michael and Carly made this awesome box when we went to New York City for the Blue Album for Good Luck. It was a replica of the box and talismans that Kiss received in their fantastic film, The Elder. We opened the box up, and let's see, open the next slide, please. You see the talismans. Those are handmade by Michael and Carly. Pretty amazing. They were for good luck, and I think it worked. Thank you, girls. Next slide, please. This is our friend Pat Finn, who's kind of responsible for many of the guys meeting each other back in the day, wearing one of the first Weezer t-shirts ever. We made 20 of that shirt. If you ever see it on eBay, you should probably bid. You won't see it again. Next slide, please. There's Rick Ocasek. Here we are in Electric Lady Studios working on the Blue Album. Rick is one of the most coolest guys in the world. He's one of the nicest guys ever. We saw him in the New York shows he came. It was really cool. Next slide, please. There they are at work in Electric Lady Studios. The amplifiers used to turn up by themselves, or so it's said. It's the ghost of Jimi Hendrix there. Next slide, please. It's true. There's Rivers at work on the B3 organ. I don't believe we ended up using it on the album, but maybe we did. Next slide, please. Here's Brian Bell's audition tape. Brian joined the band during the making of the Blue Album. It says, "Hi Weezer, please enjoy this fine recording, compliments of Radio Shack and Brian Bell. I hope to see you in New York soon. Thank you, Brian." Brian did a good job, and sure enough, he came to New York, and here's the first picture of him as a member of Weezer. Next slide, please. There he is. Look how happy that dude is. He's like, yes, I did it. Next slide, please. Here's Brian and Rivers working shortly thereafter in the rehearsing. Next slide, please. And there's our Bacchus drumhead that you see recreated on the drumhead today. We had to have that to make it complete. Bacchus is our mascot. Pat was trying to draw Popeye and failed miserably. it turned into Bacchus. Next slide, please. Now, we tried to come up with an album cover for the Blue Album. This photo didn't make it, obviously. Toilets are not going to work. Next slide, please. And gang signs weren't really going to work either. Next slide, please. But now we're getting somewhere. Next slide, please. And we had to come up with a logo, too. There's about 100 ideas there, none of which made it. Next slide, please. Here's River's idea for what the Blue Album should look like. That's his original sketch. I think that was pretty much what it turned out. It's nice. Next slide. Here's my attempt at making it a little more, figured out. Next slide, please. And after it was released, everybody was like, oh man, you ripped off the Feelies. We're like, who are the Feelies? We actually didn't know. So we found out about the Feelies cover after the Blue Album came out. What really we were ripping off was that Beach Boys cassette in the middle there. Next slide, please. So once we had a nice album cover, we could make much nicer flyers, obviously. There's one with our friends That Dog, a great band. That Dog, Teenage Fan Club, and Weezer played this venue in 1995. That was a great show. Next slide, please. To tour, we had to get a van.